Hello and welcome back to Gangs and Growing Pains. Today's episode, I'm going to be talking about a concept that I have been really pondering on in my head, and I feel like it's been like a common theme. I don't know, it just keeps coming up in my head as a thought that I have that is really quite ironic once you think about it. It's about like our youthfulness in adulting. I don't know where I was going with that quite, but it's about like basically growing up and adulting and how we kind of search for like youthfulness later on down the road because we left it all behind. So that's just lightly touching on the topic and like some of the things I want to talk about it, but we're going to be going into it more deeply in this video, of course. And I definitely recommend, if you like this one, go ahead and go to the last one I did about, like, I think it's Realizing You Shrank Your Dreams. That one's definitely one you're gonna want to listen to if you like this one and the contents in this one. It's really about kind of like a sub-genre of this topic I'm talking about today. So if you do like this one, go ahead and hop over to that one. I might link it in actually the end notes in this one. Or the end screen, so that you can just go right over to it if you want to. Very similar to this one and kind of touches upon like the same type of, like I said, genre. So, going into this one, I definitely have been thinking about this whole concept in my mind. I feel like it's very ironic that when we are younger, we have this wide sense of imagination and this wide sense of like exploration too. We're very adventurous and we, of course, everything is very new to us. Like, we are experiencing things for the first time, so the world is so large, even though it may just be your little neighborhood that you live in, right? And there's something really, like, magical to that. Like, I often ponder back on, like, my childhood, and I'm like, oh my god, even just going out and, like, lifting up stones was so adventurous to see what kind of bugs were underneath. And honestly, that's still like kind of adventurous and I think it's pretty cool. But the interest that you had in it back then was so like, you know, that rock, underneath that rock, this is gonna sound so weird, but like underneath that rock was a whole world, right? It was like this little like this place where you're like, oh, I get to see a little bit of what the earth has to give. I don't even know if, like, I'm explaining this right, but that's just kind of how it was in my opinion, and, like, what I miss about that. Like, you never knew what kind of, like, bugs were gonna be underneath the rock when you, like, lifted it up. And even if you're not quite into, like, the nitty-gritty or were, like, an outdoorsman or whatever like me, you probably do have a sense of, like, looking back on maybe like a dollhouse or something like that and how it felt like it was actually a big house. Like that kind of vibe is what I'm talking about. That kind of like imaginative, I can't talk today. Exploration that even though it's like a little space, it's so big still. So, that's I hope I'm explaining this right. But that's not even really what, like, I want to get into. It's kind of just an example of how, like, our imagination works and how, like, exciting it is when we're little and younger, right? And then we start to grow up, and I feel like when you get into your teens, you're kind of like, okay, like, now you're getting curious about, like, the outside world, like, beyond your yard. You're curious about more worldly things, which is great. And you start learning, obviously, about different cultures, stuff like that, and hopefully, you know, bettering your knowledge on the world and everything. But what still happens is that since it's all still new, we still have that sense of, like, very, like, oh my god, you can do anything, like, what am I going to do, what am I going to pick, you know, like, when you're thinking about careers, what can I be, you know, it's still very youthful and imaginative and just adventurous, even just branching out and getting your license and everything, you're going on these new adventures, you're able to take yourself places and you have this freedom, right? So it's kind of like, that kind of vibe is also, it's still there when you're, like, going into your teens and everything. Now, when you go into, like, I feel like when you're in high school, things kind of dull down a little bit. The end of high school, you're busying yourself on worrying what you're going to do with your life. You know, everybody's like, what are you thinking about doing for a career? You know, all that jazz, all the fun stuff. We all know about that. And it kind of gets into the realm of like, it's just not like, I don't know, that sense of adventure all of a sudden starts to become, I guess, pressure, you would say. And it's more of like this pressure of like, oh my gosh, I have to figure out everything right now, right? I have to figure out what I'm doing. I have to figure out what I want to do. And it's just like a really like hard pressure to go through, I guess. And yet you still have a little bit of that imagination, right? You still have your interests and your hobbies and stuff like that. Hopefully that you're like getting into, now I would say around that kind of age, it's the passion really, the love, stuff like that. You're very passionate about what you're into, and I guess like wear your heart on your sleeve is more of the vibe I'm getting, like, or I got when I was that age. And since you have this new freedom and you're able to go out and do yourself and everything, do things yourself, I mean, you're able to express yourself in a way that you weren't able to before. And I think that's what each chapter kind of like brings, like a new way to make yourself authentic and express yourself. So that's kind of like the whole vibe of, I would say, like youthfulness or whatnot, if you will. The adventuration. I really am not, these words are like throwing me off today. I'm so sorry. The adventure of it all, that's all I'm gonna say on that. The imagination that you have, your mind is still very much working in like oh my gosh, what if this happened? You know how like when you're like a really little kid, you're like, what if I was able to like move things with the force? Like you sat in your room and you were like, I don't want to go do the light switch, so I'm just gonna try to be a Jedi tonight, and I'm really like focusing super hard on that light switch. And like it was definitely something I did when I was younger. Yeah, I was like, I am not gonna turn off the light switch tonight. But you know, that's kind of like what it is when you're really young. That imagination is like very, very like, it's really magical in a sort of way. And it really is a shame that, you know, that kind of goes away. I'm not saying I'm still trying to sit here and use the force to turn off the lights, but I'm also not half as scared as I was when I was younger either. That's a whole new thing. But, you know, I mean, maybe that's a little bit of the sense of like why, you know, that's a whole nother subcontext, but like why we do that is we make up like these rational things in our head that we, like when you become an adult, you're like, okay, there's laws that the world goes by. That's a whole nother world that we're not going to touch upon today. But yeah, that's kind of like these things get, I guess that's a good segue. These things get replaced by those laws of the world and how it works and what you have to do when you get older and everything, you know, and a little bit of that framework comes in where you're constantly, I feel like people are trying to help you, they're telling you what to do, but it is a sense of you're constantly being told what to do. And you have that vibe of like, okay, you're seeking that advice a lot more, unless you're really rebellious, like, going into adulthood, which brings me to my next point. So then we enter the world of substances, and I feel like this kind of does a little bit of a number to your youthfulness as you grow up. When you become an adult and you're able to get these substances, aka, I mean, you can get alcohol when you're younger, through various ways, but usually when you have that freedom of like going out to the clubs, going out to the bars and everything, that's going to be something that, you know, kind of absorbs you for a while. If you're that kind of person, you may be a type of person who just likes to go and hang out with your friends a lot and everything. All good things. But that sense of like self and authenticity kind of begins to wear as you feel like you need to be a type of person to fit into the world. Like, I'm sure a lot of people still keep their authenticity And like really, really cheers for you if you do, because that is something that is very rare going into adulthood, I feel. And even in my case, I really got lost in the sauce on what I should do, what other people were telling me to do, just being like a people pleaser of it all and all that jazz. And, you know, in my jobs, the jobs you usually go into as your first jobs are really going to want you to be like that. They're really going to want you to be by the book. You know, if you were in corporate environments, you really, really know what I mean. But, you know, just a sense of like the boss is the person who like makes the rules, you follow type of thing. And usually that's the positions you're going to be getting into when you kind of crack into adulthood at first and get out of college and everything, right? Unless you've gone to college for something. In that case, you know, you've probably gone to college, you either partied it up or got your degree, hopefully, or you were like, you know, hanging out with your friend on the side, kind of like going through, keeping your head down and going through your work, which is all great and everything, but it's still this structure that you've been gone through, just like in corporate workplaces. If you didn't go to college, you're kind of getting your life like structured for you. I don't even know, I'm sure you guys get it, but it's all planned out, like your classes and stuff like that, or your 9 to 5 or whatever or whatnot. And it's, you go from like going under your parents who have, you know, the structured household and everything, most likely, and then you kind of like go into a structured environment usually when you get older and you just start adulting, you know. Hopefully you're like, okay, I'm going to try and make some money, try and do my own thing, you know. And you go into that kind of like field right there. And I feel like it does really like, it really gets into the nitty gritty of like becoming an adult. And to a certain extent when you're like younger and whatnot, 18, 20, you know, like you're like, okay, now it's almost like a suit you gotta put on. You're like, okay, I gotta be a big girl now. Like I gotta be an adult now. And I gotta act like I am one. And I gotta blend in real nice too. And that kind of forms this like people pleasing kind of like, you know, not even heavily on the people pleasing, but just this overall like, even if you are a more authentic person, you're still going to be trying to blend in into the crowd somewhat, and you know, to survive. It's like a survival instinct. It's definitely our society and everything that kind of makes you feel like, you know, you gotta do this to survive. But I digress. This is more of a what was I saying? I don't know, I just totally lost my train of thought. I was talking about like structure in college, and you go from like your parents' house and then college, whatnot. And so basically my gist of this all is that these are the steps that we kind of take that I feel like, or at least in my case, I felt like I really fell off of the playfulness of life, the imaginatariness of life, if that's even a word, the imagination to life, and like the adventure to life. And sure, like I wanted to travel and everything. In high school, I definitely thought I was going to be going down that road and everything. Things happened. I kind of touched upon that in my video before, like I said. But, you know, you kind of get shrunk down more into this person that is, I don't want to say like a 9 to 5, but kind of, yeah. A less creative version of yourself. And that's kind of like what happens, I feel like, when you start adulting. And like I said, you're trying to blend in. However, I feel like there's a very ironic twist that happens later on in life. And of course, I'm still pretty young, you know, and I have yet a lot of life to go. But I feel like one of the things that I want to keep in mind, and I'm learning that I'm probably going to want to keep in mind to have a happy life, is to keep that youthfulness and keep that sense of adventure in my life and that imagination in my life, you know? If you go through life and you are looking at everything as this black and white newspaper of a world, it's not going to make you happy. At least I know personally it's not going to make me happy doing it that way. I kind of already tried that. I dabbled in it, and luckily I very early found out, like, I don't really want to do this. This isn't really my thing. And I don't think it's really anybody's thing. I think that to a certain extent, it's not really healthy to lose all that playfulness, all that, imagination and adventure in our lives. And the ironic part is that most people grow up and they call it like the midlife crisis. And what I believe from what I'm getting the gist of it is that, like, is it not just us looking for our youthfulness again, right? For our youth again. You talk to these older people, these people that, are much older than you and have already experienced life, more life than you have, I guess you would say. And they always throw out certain phrases, some of them do at least. One of the ones I know being a very, like, vast one that I always hear, and all my friends have told me they've heard too, is, oh, those hobbies, stuff you're doing now, that's not gonna last that long. Wait till you get a job and it consumes your life, and then you're not gonna be able to do it anymore, and the stuff that you care about and all that's kind of gonna go down the drain. When you get older, you'll know what I'm talking about. And they throw out, like, phrases like that and everything. Yet these people that, you kind of, like, are sitting there and listening to them say this, at least I'm a little bit like, it kind of sounds like you have a lack of just playfulness and youth in your life. Like, it sounds like you just let all of that go from your life. And if there's something that I'm learning right now that I think is going to be very useful for my life in the future, is that it's very important to still have that playfulness in your life. To still nurture that child part of you that wants to go and adventure and everything. And not just in a way of, like, getting your vacation during the summer. It's in everyday life. Like, you gotta go to work every day, right? You're going to work every day. You have to make money every day. You put that pressure on yourself. You have to go home and, hopefully you're paying attention to your family or whoever you're living with. If you're living alone, you're kind of like, you go and, like, you watch TV or whatever every day. You even give times to, like, I'm sure you give time to, like, healthy things. Like, maybe you do go to the gym or have some of your light hobbies you're still doing, right? But even with your hobbies there, setting those aside, are you still, like, I'm sure most of them still have, like, playfulness in them. If there's something you genuinely love doing when you're outside of work, I'm sure they do nurture you in a sort of way. But are you giving this attention to all of those stuff every day like clockwork, and you're still not paying attention to the fact that you may need a little bit of, like, playfulness and adventure in your life on even, like, a weekly basis, even, like, a day out of the week? Like, I feel like that's something that we kind of, like, push aside and, like, is the first thing we throw away, right? And that's the most ironic part of it all. Youthfulness, and I would actually go as far as to say that it is really the imagination that we throw away. We can keep the youthfulness by doing hobbies and stuff like that and whatnot. I think what I'm trying to say here is that the imagination is the first thing to get thrown away when you become an adult. Think about this for a second. The imagination is the first thing to get thrown away when you think, okay, here we go, I gotta start adulting. That's the first thing to go, right? And the irony of it all, I think, this is the big food for thought that I've been thinking about lately. The irony of it all is that that is the thing that we are most likely looking for later in our lives to give us happiness. Think about it for a second. The thing that you're trying to throw away, the first thing you dispose of probably to become an adult, is the thing that you try to seek desperately later in your life because you notice that that sense of happiness that it gives you is gone. The youthfulness that it gives you is gone. And you're living this kind of like mundane life without it. Even though you do have your hobbies and stuff like that. And most of the time, this may be like calling people out a little bit, but they're hobbies that the society and whatnot deems okay to have as an adult. Like maybe you're into cars or whatever when you were a little kid and you like them now, and then you're really getting into that now. That's, yeah, I can see that. Like, you had an interest in it and everything. And I'm not saying interest can't grow later in life, but is it maybe that why you picked up like cars and like that kind of thing is more of like a hobby in your later life when you had no interest in it before? Is it maybe that you're just trying to seek something and you know that that thing is accepted by the adults, so you kind of like go for that, you know? I don't even know, like, I'm trying to explain it here, but I was really thinking about it today, like, particularly the concept of, like, this is what we throw away first, our imagination, and then later in life, it gets so mundane because, you know, that imagination is gone. You've gotten rid of it, and it's really a muscle you have to practice. So you're not practicing it anymore, and then it eventually becomes this thing of like, oh, you know, I don't even know how to get that back, you know, but I do know that it is crucial to having happiness in my life. Now, not a lot of people really may realize this in their life, you know? If you haven't, like, looked at it that way or whatnot, some people genuinely probably don't. They're kind of just like, I don't know why I'm not happy, you know? But everybody has their own opinions. I'm not saying that mine is superior to anybody else's or people can't have their own. I'm just saying from what kind of blew my mind was that I realized that today. At least from my experience, I realized that that was true, and it was going to be true for me if I didn't gear up and start getting a little bit of my imagination back. I would like to think that in the past few years, I've really dredged it from the depths of my soul and brought it back a little bit by nurturing more of like my like younger child self and everything, but it was something that I was so, like, it became so hard to reach my imagination again and just even go out and be adventurous without thinking about it, you know, that I was genuinely impressed by how much it was hidden inside me, and I could not reach it. And I was thinking, you know, I always kind of thought, like, how hard would it have been if I let more years go by and I had not been, like, realizing that that was something that I needed to do for my mental health and everything. How hard it would have been to go back there and find it if, you know, I didn't start doing it now. I mean, think about how quick time passes. Think about how easy it is to forget about something that, you know, like, even the things sometimes that are important to you, in how busy we are in life and adulting and everything, and how fast new trends and things like that go by. The world moves at such a fast pace, it's hard for your brain to keep up with that. And then we're supposed to figure out, you know, later on in life if we're not happy where we're at, or maybe you are and you're just wondering why you can't be happy with the life you have, even though it's hard to explain, but you are happy with it. But it's very mundane because you don't have that part of yourself and you're looking for that youth again, right? But like I keep saying, and it's only because it blew my mind when I kind of thought of it this way, that was like the first thing that you let go and you were ready to do away with when it came time to grow up and be an adult. And I feel like that's, I don't know, it just genuinely blew my mind when I thought about that. And that is genuinely what I wanted to make this video on, for the sole purpose of sharing that little bit of, like, I don't know, intuition that came in when I thought about that a few days ago. And I've just been rolling it over in my head like, wow, what an ironic situation. You can try and reach it through like nostalgia and stuff like that. And I think that's what I was doing for a few years there, when I was really like in a place where I felt lost and I didn't know like what was gonna make me happy in life. It was like I got things I wanted for the most part. It's not like my life was perfect, but I did know that, you know, you should be grateful for what you have. And hopefully you are, which I was. But to have a sense of like, to not have, and I feel like I was trying to also reach it a lot through TV and just, what is it called again when you're immersing yourself in something because you're a little maybe depressy outside of it. I forgot what it's called, but it's that immersion into like TV, phone, like social media, things like that, when you're not really happy with what you got going on in your everyday life. It's called escapism. Escapism is what I'm trying to say here. You go into a state of escapism. And I also found out that that was something that I would have been trapped in a lot longer if I didn't realize that I needed a little bit of that adventure and imagination back in my life. And it's something that's crucial if you don't want to keep trying to just escape from reality, because that it's kind of what replaces the imagination when I feel like we go into adulthood, especially now that we have like phones and social media and everything. Not to be like an old granny or anything, you know, I'm not putting any of that down, obviously. I'm talking to a phone, but it's definitely the first thing that it replaces the imagination. And I feel like to a certain extent phones and social media and everything do enable it a little bit, because it is very easy to replace our youth and imagination, and just in general, definitely sense of adventure, when you have a whole world in your hand that you can look at, you know, or a TV screen in front of you that you can get any platform or streaming service that has anything on it for you, right? And, you know, it's really an addictive thing that is so easy, because it's the easier route to go. It's not taking the hard route of exercising that muscle, like I said, that takes time, and revisiting some of your like loves of being a youth and everything. Because sometimes, and that's the kind of like last point I kind of wanted to touch upon in this video, sometimes it's genuinely hard, or at least it was for me, to go back and realize that you kind of left a part of you or a piece of you behind in leaving your imagination. And hard in a way, I mean, where maybe you had like some dreams that you really, really wanted to fulfill, and you had some wants that just really were made and created by your heart that you wanted to do. That's when it can be hard to go back and try and get your youth back and take more power into your life as far as like playfulness and adventure, because you're immediately going to be confronted with everything that you told yourself you were going to do that you didn't do. They're obviously going to be the tough things, like the really, really fun, adventurous things. You were like, I'm going to do that, you know, and it's later on in your life, and you haven't done it yet. You know, for me, I'm still younger, so I understand that is a little bit toxic. But I also think to be like, it's a little toxic to be like, oh, I haven't done it yet when I'm so young, you know. There's still so much time left, even at any point of your life. I just want you to know, and I think I said this in the last videos, there's still so much time left, no matter at what point you are in your life. If you realize you want to do something, go and try and do it. Actually take the action to try and do it, because at the end of the day, that's going to be what is going to matter the most. When, you know, you may be sitting there thinking, like, did I even try? and you never want to come up with the answer that you didn't. Like, at least I don't think I would ever want to come up with the answer that I didn't try. I have tried many things in my life, and I've failed at many things. And failure, I've learned, is a tool that I can put in my toolbox to get me onto the next thing. Failure is not a bad thing. That's probably going to be my next video, actually. I really want to talk upon that. But genuinely, yes, it is hard to go back and face those things. And yeah, at any point of your life, do it. Just go out and start doing what you freaking want to do, because you're still living, you're still breathing. You can still, do the basic things, hopefully, But the first step is taking that look back to your youth and being like, what did light me up? What did give me excitement? What made me feel adventurous, And I think the first things we're going to come up with are those, like, traveling to different countries, or, going to, like, Africa and doing this, or being a geologist or whatever. That's, in my case, what I really was, like, into back then. But the first things that are going to pop up is those things, right? But then you got to go beyond that. That's kind of, like, your imagination of, like, what you could do when you were younger and everything. But when we're talking about, like, imagination, I also want to, like, touch upon the fact that it's not just that. It is also, like I said, remembering the little moments where you made a freaking tree fort that was super dangerous in one of your trees in the backyard, and you thought was the coolest thing ever. And to you, now, going back and, like, if you were to go back and look at that thing right now, you'd probably be like, oh my god, get down from there, that's not safe, or maybe like, oh, that's cool, but man, it looks different than I thought it did when I was younger. When I was younger, it felt like that was a whole tree house. It felt like that was a mansion in a tree I had built. But in reality, it's like, that was just you having imagination. And yes, we're going to have so much realism in what we do now, and we can't really get past this. And I think it's healthy to have that now. Like, you're not going to be building a tree house in your yard and be like, oh my god, it's a fire. No, you're probably going to be going to, like, freaking Home Depot and being like, let's map this out and actually try and make a house in my tree. But in the end, it's a double-edged sword, because one, you're doing it safer and you're still being, like, imaginative, and that's great. But two, how about that little bit of risk in your life? Like, I don't know, this is a personal take on it, but, like, the exciting part about it to me was that I was making it with what I had. Like, I was genuinely, like, I was making something out of nothing, And it was, like, building and using my imagination to think of, like, how can I place this piece here? Where's this one gonna go? I want a chair. How is that gonna be in there? Like, that kind of thing is what the imagination is about. It's really exercising that muscle, like I said, and being like, oh my god, like, I can't even, like, I didn't even think about this, but we can do this way. And that excitement you get from that youthfulness you get from that, is genuinely what I think. It's like creativity that I think that we all need in our lives later on, that we search for to make us happy. And I think it's something that, to a certain extent, we will eventually realize, if we've lost that's a part of us we kind of need to bring back in order to be happier than we are if we're not happy, or we're not feeling as fulfilled, or just in general. It's easier to be grateful when you have imagination. I feel like that's, like, it's very true. It's easier to be grateful when you have imagination. Because even the things, like, imagination's not just things that aren't real. It's, like, things that you didn't realize before. Like I said, like, oh, I didn't even know, like, we could make the chair this way. Like, it's almost like a puzzle that clicks together when you use it, and it's not always just this magical place that you escape to. No, it's actually like a puzzle, like I said, that we use to help make our life more creative and happy. And with that being said, I think that's about all I kind of like wanted to say on this topic. I really could go on forever because it really did blow my mind when I realized that. But I genuinely think that kind of covers what I was mulling over in my head and what I'm going to be putting into practice going forward in my life. And I have already started putting into practice. And let me tell you, everything I said was true. It brings more adventure into your life. You get more creative. You have more ideas and stuff like that. Like, I genuinely have my hobbies and everything I love to do. But I was still very mundanely bored of my hobbies when I was doing them without imagination. And most of them, you kind of need that creative side in imagination to be able to, like, frick around and find out, you know? And when I kind of, like, implemented that more and started working that muscle more, like, everything changed. I genuinely started feeling so much happier doing the things that I was doing. And like I said, I was able to bring a little bit more of gratitude into my life because I was looking at things differently. And change is a good thing. It's always a good thing. Many people will look at it like a bad thing and everything, but, you know, change is what we genuinely have going through life to spice things up. Like, change, that's also another topic for another time. So I'm not going to really go into that, but I think the imagination helps change your perspective a little bit and really adds spice to the life too. So that was about all I had to talk about today. Comment what you think down below or any other points about this. Or genuinely, like I said, just what you think, because this just blew my mind. I was like, oh my god, I just hacked life. I need to like talk about this for a second. So I genuinely want to know what you think. Subscribe if you like this content for more. I will be putting more out. I also have my different types of videos I make. I make some on gym, life in general, like healthy lifestyle, and anime. I love anime, so I also have been making videos on that on my channel. It's underneath the, I think, anime playlist, so go out and check that out if you're into that too. And keep on smashing your goals and doing the best in your life, because genuinely, if you wake up every day and you're trying to do a little bit better than the day before, you're already doing great. So have a good rest of your day, and I will see you next time.